Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Somebody asked me how to make a dynamic list in C, so I'm going to show you how to do that. I have a bit of pain in my arm today for some reason. I think I did too much programming last night, and also I went to the gym and did a arm workout, so it's probably a combination of both. But we're gonna try to make this video anyways, so I'm just gonna go to my workspace here and I'm gonna create a directory called, I don't know, dyn list. Okay, and we're gonna do this very basic. We're just gonna create a main.c file and we're gonna start coding. Okay. So a dynamic list is something that you very commonly want to use. And what is a dynamic list? Well, a dynamic list is a data type, I guess, or a container of, well, it's an array basically, and you can push items to the array and it will automatically grow. There aren't any default arrays like dynamic arrays in C, so you have to make one yourself. So yeah, basically a dynamic array is, or a dynamic list, or whatever you want to call it, it's basically an array that grows automatically when you push items to it. So yeah, let's just get coding, I guess. So first of all, what you want is a main function. Okay, and let's just see if we can compile it. Let's actually put the command line down here. Now I'm going to do gcc main.c, and it compiles. We get the binary here. Okay, so we're going to have to define some structs here as well, or one struct. And first I'm just going to have a little bit of drink here. Okay, so we can do a typedef struct. I don't know what we're gonna call it. Dynamic list struct. Dynamic list t. I usually name my structs the typedefs with a t in the end like this to be very clear with that it's a type. Okay. So what do we need to store in this struct? Well, we're gonna have it's gonna have a size, of course. So we're gonna have a size t size. We can call this length. Maybe length is better. I usually go with size, but it's basically the length of or it's a value that knows that is how many items we have in the list, basically. And we also need to store the items somehow. And this dynamic lister is going to be very generic, which means that we will be able to store anything in it. Now, we could have it not, we could make it not as generic as well by actually defining exactly what we want to be able to put in here. But let's just make this generic, okay? So to make it generic, we can just use, we can just say that the list we have in here is just going to be a list of void pointers, which means that they can be anything. Void items. Okay. And then we also want to have a size t item size. So this item size here is actually how big each item is going to be. How much memory do we need for each item? Okay, then we're also going to need a function to initialize this dynamic list. We can do dynamic list t init dynamic list, and we could have a size t item size. So when you create the dynamic list, you have to specify how big each item is going to be. And then we're going to do dynamic dynamic list t list is equal to calloc. So we're gonna allocate some memory, and we want to allocate one item list or one dynamic list. So we're going to do one size of struct dynamic list struct. Okay, and then we're going to do list item size is equal to item size, the item size that we're giving this dynamic list here. So this is like the constructor for our dynamic list. And then we can do list length is going to be 0 by default when you first initialize the array. And the list items is just going to be a void pointer. And then we're going to return the list. Okay. So now we can actually create a one of these lists here. We can do in our main function, dynamic list t list is equal to init dynamic list. And then we have to specify the size of whatever we're going to put in here. So maybe we're going to have a, I don't know, maybe we're just going to store, let's just create another struct of something that we're going to store in here. So let's just do type def struct animal struct animal t char name animal t, and we're going to have a function to initialize an animal. Init animal const char name animal t animal is equal to calloc one size of struct animal struct, and then we need to allocate memory for the name. So animal animal name is equal to calloc strulen name plus one size of char. Now the reason we're doing +1 here is because strings contains a null terminated byte at the end, so we need to handle that. And now we're gonna copy the name here, so string cpui animal name. So we're copying this name into the animal name field here, and then we're returning the animal. Okay, so now we're able to create animals as well. So now when we create a list here, we can say that each item will have the size of animal of struct animal struct pointer. Okay. Now, if we compile this, we're going to get some errors. For example, we need to include stdlib and string.h. Include string.h. The string.h is because we're using string copy and string len. And we're also going to need stdlib.h because we're using the function calloc. Okay, let's try and compile again. It compiles, so now if we run this, it's not going to do anything. But we have created a list here. We're not able to add anything to the list yet. So our list function also needs to have a function to add items to it. So let's write that function here. We can do void dynamic list append. Maybe append is a good name. And the first argument will be the dynamic list we want to append to. So dynamic list t dynamic list. And the next argument is the item we want to append. So void item. And then we're going to do if dynamic list items is equal to void pointer. So if our items is a void pointer, then we need to allocate the items. So then dynamic list items is equal to calloc one size of dynamic, one dynamic list item size. So this is the item size that we stored on the struct. So when we initialize the list here, we're saying that every item will have the size of struct animal struct pointer, which is stored here. And now when we are allocating memory for a item, we know how big we need this allocation to be. Okay, and otherwise, if the dynamic list isn't a void pointer, then we need to reallocate. So dynamic list items is equal to reallocate dynamic list items. And then we need to do we're gonna do dynamic list size size times of dynamic list item size. I think that makes sense. We can actually, instead of doing 1 here, we can put dynamic list size, because at the first thing we will do in this function is actually to increment the size. So we're gonna do dynamic list size plus equals 1, because we're adding an item, right? We're appending an item, so we need to increase the size here. So okay. Now when we have done the allocations here, we can do dynamic list items, dynamic list size minus 1 is equal to item. Is equal to the item that we have sent to this function here. Okay, so now if I've done everything correctly, we should be able to add animals to this list here. So we can do the first thing we're gonna do here is to, let's just print the size of the list, so list size. Let's compile again. That didn't work. We're actually calling it length. We're calling it length, sorry. So instead of doing size here, let's do length. And let's do length here as well. And to print something, we also need to include stdio.age. Okay, let's compile again. Now it's compiling, and if we run it, we can see that the list size is 0 because we haven't added anything. But now we can go ahead and add some animals, I guess. So we can do dynamic list append, and we want to append to the list, and we want to append an animal, so we need to create an animal with the init animal function that we made here. So init animal, and let's do a let's call it a dog. Let's append a dog to the list. And now if we compile again and we run, we're going to see that the size now is 1. Let's add some more animals. Dog, cat, cow, bird. Do we have another animal here to add? Fish. Now if you compile and run it, we can see that we have 5 animals. Okay. So what if we want to loop through these animals and print them? Well, we can do for int I is equal to 0 if I is less than list length I plus plus. Printf list items I name. Now the problem here is that we can't access name directly on the item here. Because it's a void pointer, remember? The list doesn't actually know what kind of items we're storing here. So unfortunately, we actually need to cast this here. So we need to do animal t like so. Now if you compile it, we are able to print all our items. And of course you can remove the unnecessary brackets here. You could even make this into a unary operation, or a ternary operation, sorry. You can have dynamic list items is equal to void like that. Okay, then we want to have that. Otherwise, we want to have that. So dynamic list items is equal to so there we go. Now we got it a little bit more compact. We should still have, we're not having the same behavior because I missed a semicolon. There we go, still works. And you know, if you don't want to have to do this casting down here, then you need to specify what you're actually storing. So for example, we could specify that we're actually storing animals by instead of using a void pointer, we could actually use animal t like that. But that would make the list ungeneric. It wouldn't be generic anymore. It depends on your use case, I guess. But if you want to have a generic list like this, you should probably use void pointers. In some certain situations, it's considered unsafe to have void pointers like that. But for this example here, I think it's fine. So yeah, that's how you do that. And let me just show you that you can actually put other things in this list as well. So let's say let's create another list down here. And let's say we want to store, I don't know, what do we want to store? What do we want to store? Maybe we want to store size of I don't know what we want to store. Let's just define another struct. I don't know. Person struct int age person t person struct pointer. Okay, and then we can do let's just add a function to initialize a person as well. So person t person init person int age person t person is equal to calloc 1 size of struct person struct person age is equal to age return person. Okay, and then you can do oh, we have to name this list something else. Let's call it list 2, and then we can go ahead and append some items to our list 2 init person, and we're gonna have a list of persons or people, and we're also going to loop through them. And now we have to cast it to a person. And now we're no longer printing strings, we're printing digits, and we're gonna print the age. Okay. And I did a typo. There we go. So we print our list of animals and our list of people or persons. And the animals has a field of strings or a field called name. And the persons has a field called age, which is just an integer. So that's how you do a dynamic list. Of course, maybe you also want to be able to remove items from a list. Now this is a bit more complicated, and I think this video is already getting a bit long. But if you want to see how to also make it possible to remove items from the list, then just write me a comment under this video telling me you'd like to see it, and I'll make a video of it. But yeah, this is the basic concept of how to make a dynamic list. And if you're not already a subscriber, hit the subscribe button. And if you don't want to miss any of my uploads, hit the bell button. And I'll see you in the next video.